Yes, hello everyone. The international series is in the rearview window. Let's talk all about it. This is the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast.
Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
Yeah, 6 weeks down into the season, London behind us. Still plenty of football to look forward to, though 11 more weeks on the schedule. You'll know if you listened in last week that Josh is on holiday this week. Hope you're enjoying Romania, buddy. But we have a more than capable replacement coming in off the subs bench. Callum, evening, buddy. Welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you on board, mate.
Thank you very much. I remember many coaches of mine telling me I was an incapable substitute, so I appreciate the compliment and you bringing in, stepping into Josh's very large shoes, but hope to do a decent job for you guys.
I'm sure you will indeed, mate. I'm sure you will. And that leads me to my regular buddy in crime. Steve, how you doing, fella?
It is a sad day for Eagles fans this week, because as listeners of the pod will know, my favourite Zach Ertz has finally been traded to the Arizona Cardinals, drafted by the Eagles in 2013. After Lane Johnson. That's quite a draft for the Eagles, who don't usually draft very well. Lane Johnson in the first, Zach Ertz in the second. Finally traded away to the Cardinals, probably going to go there and compete in the playoffs. So I don't bemoan him at all. Hell of a career in Philadelphia. Sad to see him go, but yeah, the train rolls on in Philadelphia without him.
It does, mate. And we kind of almost accepted he was going to stay an Eagle, so there you go. I did like that little meme that he went to bed 2 and 4 and woke up 5 and 0. That's a pretty good. That's a pretty good NFL career for you, isn't it?
Apparently, there was some controversy because some people had him in their fantasy teams and he'd already played, and yet they wanted him to be available again, and all sorts of stuff. But yes, he goes on to a much more successful team this season.
He does indeed. And we'll get on to it, mate. They didn't need him Sunday night. They had more than enough. We'll get on to that, though, as we get through the podcast, I'm sure. Let's start off then, fellas. Let's start in London. That's what started the weekend off. Got to say, certainly speaking from experience, I had an absolutely fantastic weekend. Didn't really appeal much, to be honest, when the games came out. I think a lot of people have complained about the fact that we ended up with 4 pretty poor teams, certainly from a record perspective. I certainly think when it was announced, nobody predicted the Dolphins would be sitting with just 1 win at the time of coming over. But in general terms, I thought the actual experience was phenomenal. The stadium, if you haven't been and you're a fan of the NFL, do try and get yourself some tickets next year. The in-game experience I thought was fantastic. Yes, it was marred a little bit by a couple of incidents. Obviously, we had the idiot running on the field at the start of the game, which was probably more of a concern than the stuff that happened in terms of the beer being thrown around. I think that was done more in jest than it certainly was done in any sort of aggressive nature. Although, obviously, not downplaying if you did get hit by one. I got hit by one on the back of my neck. Like I say, I certainly wasn't feeling for my life, though. I think it was more in playfulness than anything else. But a fantastic weekend. So, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Took the wife down there for the weekend. Went some friends who took their first game in, and I know, that they really enjoyed it as well. Big shout out to my friends for actually encouraging me to get tickets. So thanks to Mike, Rachel, Alan, and Neil, because I probably wouldn't have gone without them this weekend. But enough about the experience, Callum. Obviously, should have mentioned at the start you are a Dolphins fan. Probably not the week you would therefore want to make your podcast debut with us. But let's talk the game itself. Started pretty well for Miami. Tua moved the ball at will on that first drive, and you thought, here we go, this is going to be a good afternoon. But it then became a little bit of a game of attrition, and ultimately the Jags found a way to get it done in the end, mate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I went into Tottenham on Sunday morning with absolutely no thought that I was going to be leaving with anything less than a victory. I hadn't considered it, to be completely frank with you. I felt like the Dolphins were unlucky to only have one win going into Tottenham, and I now feel like we're an absolute shambles of a team coming out of Tottenham. It's a game of inches and margins, and 4th and 1, and you don't get it with Malcolm Brown, and give credit to the kicker. Feels like they've picked him out of their back office. He was probably typing on a computer last week, and now he's kicking game-winning field goals. So it's a bit of a killer for a Dolphins fan. It took me a few minutes of silence to recompose myself after the final kick went in. The game winner is not the one I have a problem with. The one that tied the game, that started out in West London and ended up through the arches. There was absolutely, that had no right to go in. You're right. Tua's opening drive was fantastic. He started really well, moved the ball, and ended with a nice touchdown for Jalen Waddle, which was a really good sign. I mean, Waddle and Gesicki are the two massive positives to come out of the game for very obvious reasons. We still can't run the ball ever. And a season that had a lot of promise going into it, and I was very optimistic. Genuinely, I thought we're definitely the second best team in the AFC East, and we may still find a way to end up that way if Flores gets the defense together. But it's been very, very disappointing through 6 weeks, to be completely frank. And Sunday was, you wish you could say it was an aberration, but it feels like perhaps where this team is right now. Not that we weren't missing players, Devontae Parker helps, but Xavier Howard is obviously a far bigger miss. And it really was a tough one to take.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't obviously get the pleasure of the commentary in the stadium, but I thought everybody knows I love Kevin Harlan. The call for that field goal was just fantastic. Like you say, it started off like 15 yards wide of the uprights and still managed to find its way in. So it was a pretty
he aimed for
incredible
Wembley and still made it. It's just
well, fair play to him. Fair play to him. It was a good kick. I mean, Steve, I know you obviously didn't go obviously to the game, but in terms of the game, obviously from a Jags perspective, let's talk them a little bit. Obviously broke the second longest losing streak in NFL history at 20 games, leaving only Detroit now with a chance of being 0-17. So we said that the Jags might fall into that. We said that the Texans might. They both got the win on the board. I was actually quite impressed with Trevor Lawrence. Thought he showed great composure. I think there was one. I think it was the fumble. He held the ball a little bit too long, but rookies do that from time to time. But it was a really composed performance. James Robinson, decent enough again on the ground, 73 yards from 17 carries, certainly much more on the ground than what the Dolphins put up. Positive signs I would suggest there for Jacksonville after a couple of really tricky weeks, particularly off the field.
I've seen a couple of people suggesting that can we just consider Jacksonville still winless on US soil, and actually they should continue their winless run. But no, I mean Trevor Lawrence, he's starting to sort of settle in a bit, isn't he? And he's starting to calm down, and there's obviously only a limited amount you can do when the team is obviously as bad as it is. But some of the throws he was making looked really polished and looked like a guy who's been in the league for several years. The one he threw to Marvin Jones in the end zone for the touchdown was sublime. That was a hell of a throw. So he's starting to settle down, and that's good to see. I think a lot of the rookies are starting to sort of bed themselves in and learn their offenses, and it was always going to take time. So it'd be I think if they're obviously going to get themselves another high draft pick, I don't think anyone's denying that. Add to that line, and if they can protect him a little bit more and give him some more time in the pocket, I think they could. They've definitely obviously got the answer at quarterback. I don't think there's any denying that. And I think Jacksonville, the only issue that they do have is what's going to happen at head coach, because what this win has done is swept a lot of that stuff under the carpet, and it's sort of silenced a lot of things, because now they're talking on the field, and they've actually made it work, and they've come over here and a really impressive win against, like you said, Callum, a Miami team that a lot of people would have suggested that there was no way that Miami was going to lose this game, and now here we are. Miami are 1-5. And as a supporter of the team that owns Miami's first overall pick next season,
You're
I'm
welcome.
literally rubbing my hands together, thinking I thought Miami's pick might be in the range of like sort of 20 to 25, somewhere around there, and the fact that it could be top 5 is insane to me. So as you're on the pod and you're a Miami fan, I wanted to ask a couple of questions like I did with Dave in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago. I saw someone tweet last week, one of the NFL analysts said that Tua isn't the problem, but he's also not the answer. Is that fair? Is that a fair assessment? Do you think that Tua is still not really the answer to Miami's issues?
I think that's definitely a fair statement so far. There is an argument that he hasn't played a full season. He's had injuries. He's been in and out. Is there an argument that those injuries are maybe showing he's a little bit too fragile? Yeah, you could make that argument as well. I'm not ready to jettison him or abandon the project yet. I think there are 100% issues around him. I like Myles Gaskin. I think he can be a good running back, but he is not an elite running back. And not having a running game to support that quarterback can be problematic. I think that Waddle is a huge addition to the passing game and really gives him a second target alongside the Gesicki's and the Parkers of the world. So I guess a third target that we didn't have previously. I think last season we relied heavily on the defense to bail us out. And to put it bluntly, so far they haven't done that. There's multiple reasons for that. It's very hard to play defense in the NFL and it's very hard to be consistent. The problem with Tua, and it's similar to Bears fans who are trapped in the ultimate hell of, I know he's not even there anymore, but we drafted Trubisky instead of, Mahomes or Watson. And, for Dolphins fans, we're now forever tied to the successes of the LA Chargers because Justin Herbert was there. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I was saying draft Herbert. But there was discussion about, was Tua the right fit? Was Tua undersized? Did you want a left-handed quarterback or was Herbert the guy? And I think those questions have been answered by Herbert, that he can be the guy. I know he had a down week, as I'm sure we'll talk later on. But you don't have anybody questioning Justin Herbert's ability to be a quarterback in the NFL, whereas you do still have with Tua, correctly so. I think he did play well on Sunday, honestly. He had one egregious error, which was obviously the interception. But he was trying to find Waddle on a route that I like the look of. And I want him to take chances and throw the ball down the field. I don't want us to be 4 yards here, 4 yards there. We need chunk plays that you've got to have them to try and win games in this league. So it's difficult. He's not the answer. I agree with you and that statement that you said, but he could still be the answer. The question is, how long are we able to wait?
So just quickly to finish off before we move on. So let's say, for example, the Dolphins go like 5-12, for example. They have a what would be by all standards an awful season. Is that it for the Brian Flores experiment? Because Brian Flores last season was this renowned coach that was doing great things and looked like he was really leading this Miami team. If that's, let's say you go down that route, like around the 5-12 mark, what happens to him?
I don't think on 5-12 it would be the end of the Flores experiment. No, I think, God forbid 1-16. Yes. Yeah. But I do think that I think there's a line is what I'm trying to say. I do think that Flores has enough goodwill that he could have a down year and still deserve one more, if that makes sense. I think in those situations, it's also very important to see what happens in the locker room, because if you have a down year and the team is still sticking together and just losing games, you can lose close games. It can happen. If he sticks together and the team is still supporting him and still feel like they're bought in, then I would give Flores another year for sure. Once you get into kind of a couple bad years, you start worrying about Adam Gase syndrome, and then you have to move on. But I do think that Flores has enough goodwill in the bank that even I'd probably say a 4-win season is the cutoff. But you would really, I looked at our schedule earlier today, and I still think that we should get to 7 wins.
The schedule does ease up. It really does after looking at it, So, fingers crossed for Miami.
Well, no, I mean, I fully
not from our perspective. I would like them to lose as many games as possible.
And I would love Trey Lance to be a complete bust and the 49ers to continue to fail to win games. And then we own the 49ers pick and therefore we still somehow have a first round pick. But yeah, I think you might be pleasantly surprised where your additional draft pick falls next year, Steve.
Yeah, it's certainly trending in that direction, isn't it? Let's move on to one of the other contenders in that AFC East division. Let's talk New England, who put up a hell of a show, I thought, in the late window. Quite a few blowouts on this weekend, but this one certainly wasn't a blowout, and certainly many people may have thought it could have been heading into it. But I think what we saw was the continuation of Mac Jones getting better and better as the season progresses. He's been very, very quiet after a pretty decent preseason where he gained a little bit of hype and traction. It's kind of quietened down, but it's seemingly starting to pick up a little bit of steam as the season progresses. But in terms of this one, the Cowboys offensively, Dak Prescott, 51 attempts, 445 yards with 3 touchdowns. I mean, Steve, I know you hate giving them praise, but it seems as though week after week we have to continue to do so.
Yeah, I can't really avoid it, to be honest. And I'm still very much on the bandwagon of the Cowboys have been the most overhyped team of the last 25 years, and they will continue to be. But this season, they are continuing to quieten the doubters every week. And Dak Prescott, when he signed that giant contract, what is it, $45 million a season he's being paid. I remember thinking, wow, of all the players you could pay that amount of money, you've paid Dak that money when he's got his glass ankle. And yeah, he's quieting everyone down, because look at that stat line is insane. 445 yards and everything at the moment for Dallas is clicking, and it's just for Dallas, they'd probably be ashamed that they're on a bye this week. Because they have got such momentum at the moment. They want to keep playing. They just want to keep rolling. Momentum's a massive thing in the NFL. We talk about it a lot. And when you are winning games, you just want to keep winning, keep playing, just keep making those plays. And to take a week off might not be the best thing for them. But yeah, Dak was excellent. That again, we can't say enough about that 1-2 punch of Elliott and Pollard. They're just so good together. And Elliott, is beginning to look like the old Elliott. That we saw in his first couple of seasons in the NFL. He had a couple of down years where he looked like he was really trending downward, and he's certainly coming back this year. Maybe that's because they're sharing the carries with Pollard. He's not being asked to be this sort of 25 rushes a game guy that he can't do because his body eventually will give up. And their receivers, what a game for CeeDee Lamb. He was there last year in the draft. They took him with that pick thinking, they already had a great wide receiver room. And he's paying dividends now. I think that this could be a season for Dallas where one of their receiving options is going to have to walk away next year because they're just not going to have the money to pay everyone, and it could end up being Amari Cooper. He 5 targets, 55 yards. It wasn't a dreadful stat line, but don't forget that Gallup's not playing at the moment. So when he comes back in, where does Amari Cooper fit into this when CeeDee Lamb's playing as well as he is? And I can't finish talking about Dallas without mentioning again the runaway candidate for this year's Defensive Player of the Year, which is Trayvon Diggs. Another interception, insane. However, I will say that a lovely scheme from Bill Belichick to go straight back to him after he'd already almost picked a guy, and then that wonderful completion to was it Jacoby Myers? I think it was over Trayvon Diggs. Kendrick Bourne. Sorry, thank you, Callum. Yeah. So yeah, great scheming, but again, it didn't quite work because they couldn't stay away from him, and they eventually made them pay with a pick six. So, cracking game on the New England side. I thought again, like you said, Mac Jones looking really polished. He's sort of really slotted into that Belichick offense, and he looks. It looks really calm and collected with his throws. He made some really impressive throws in that game, and I think at the moment, what is lacking with New England is the weapons around him. And I think if you had 1 or 2 pieces in there, maybe an experienced receiver, dare I say, when they had him, someone like Antonio Brown, put someone in that receiving unit to maybe give them a bit of experience. And I think he'd be putting up all kinds of numbers. Good game on the ground for Damien Harris as well. I know they were missing that last week. And they probably should have won it. They probably really should have won the game. They left the door open just a little bit too much for Dallas to win in overtime. But yeah, real cracker. No one was really expecting it, I don't think, as well. So it's always nice when it's a surprise game.
Yeah, no, I certainly wasn't expecting it. I think, like you say, I think that double-headed monster in the backfield. It's not just the rushes either, is it? 17 carries for Elliott, 10 for Pollard. They also had 12 targets out the backfield in the passing game as well. So an all-round, massively featured part of that Dallas unit. Callum, just get your opinion on these two teams before we move on. I know the pre-season you were certainly very high on Dallas, and obviously you see a lot of New England in that division, like we said earlier with the Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think the Cowboys are, sadly for Steve, very, very, very legit and very, very good. I have lived in Texas, and I know that the Cowboys do tend to get overhyped, and that does happen. I just happen to think this season is an example of one where the hype is real and accurate. In terms of that game, I think you're right. I think the Patriots really, from the position they were in, really should have seen it through. They were unlucky not to win it in the end, but you get the ball first in overtime and you've got your destiny in your own hands, and they didn't quite do enough with it. And Dak and CeeDee are making plays like that. And I have to say, I have a massive soft spot for CeeDee Lamb waving goodbye to the cornerback as a celebration. I think that's fantastic. And exactly the kind of time to do a taunting, because you can't get flagged for it after the game's over. Secondly, I did just want to touch on what Steve was saying about the Cowboys wide receiving core. In my mind, I would think that Gallup is the one that you let walk away. Or are you suggesting that because Gallup is younger and perhaps a newer piece that it would be wise to let Cooper go?
I think Cooper's on 20 million a year, I think, on a 5-year deal. So I think that money I think they could probably eat that up and get him out of the building. And they've got CeeDee Lamb on a rookie contract. I think Gallup is still on a rookie contract as well, if I'm right. So I think they probably need to, with Dak's contract, they probably need to move some resources around. So I think naturally, from a cap perspective, Cooper probably pays the price. It wouldn't surprise me if he does. I'm not saying he's a bad receiver, but
No,
in the NFL. So that was my reasoning, I think.
And just a quick follow up on that: would you advocate the same for keeping Tony Pollard and moving Ezekiel Elliott on? Because I think Zeke's in great shape this year and has looked more like his old self. But every time Pollard touches the ball, there's electricity.
Oh, absolutely, and he looks like the sort of main back at the moment. But I think you don't get Pollard's success without Elliott's contribution, and they are working together in harmony so well. And I know, Sean, you mentioned last week that the best 1-2 punch in the NFL from the backfield at the moment is in Cleveland. I think Dallas would really give them a run for their money at the moment. I think that running back room is that they're just working so well together. And I was not, I've made my feelings on running backs very clear in the past. I don't believe you pay them, and I don't believe that you draft them as high as Dallas did or New York did with Barkley as well, because it's such a lot of draft capital for a position that's so injury prone as well. But again, Elliott's contract is massive. Do you move on from him and pick up a guy in the draft to complement Pollard in the same way that Elliott's complemented him? Maybe. I don't know. There's going to be some tough cap questions for Dallas coming down the pipeline. But I enjoy it while it lasts for now this season, Dallas fans, for sure.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Yeah, some interesting decisions, but certainly in win now mode and looking very, very good, aren't they? Indeed. Let's move on, fellas, to I give you the most confusing team in the National Football League, the Tennessee Titans, who managed to lose to the New York Jets one week, then struggle to wins that you think they would easily go and get. And then, nobody probably gave them a prayer last night against supposedly the hottest team in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills, who were coming in off the back of a 4-game win streak of their own. Obviously, was very impressive at the back end of last year as well. But Tennessee get it done behind the King once more. Another 3-touchdown night for Derrick Henry. Callum, you said you've watched this one in the small hours of this morning. So what was your thoughts on this one, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry is just absolutely unstoppable. I mean, that's 3 games in 6 this year that he's had 3 touchdowns in a game. So the man is absolutely unstoppable. And Tennessee's hopes really rest on him and their offensive line's ability to create holes for him. He's a really interesting case because there are so many runs where he gets bottled up, and you wonder, how does someone that explosive, that big, and that powerful get stopped for a 1-yard gain? And quite often it's just a mass of bodies. And that was nothing. There was no more clear evidence of that than the first 5 carries he had last night. The first 4 carries for 8 total yards. The 5th, 75 yards and a touchdown. He is a battering ram, and rightly so, the Titans lean on him. You're right to call them confusing, Sean. I think there are a couple other teams that I might challenge for the crown of most confusing, but the Titans are baffling in a number of ways. Ryan Tannehill has games where he looks like he's figured it all out, and then Ryan Tannehill has games where he looks like he's back in Miami with Adam Gase, and you can't really put your finger on it. Julio Jones and AJ Brown should be a wonderful 1-2 punch, but neither of them seem to be able to stay healthy. Anthony Ferguson was an unbelievably productive backup tight end behind Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith's left, and now Ferguson doesn't seem to get the ball. It's very confusing. And I say that as a bitterly scorned person who drafted Ferguson in a number of fantasy leagues. But overall, it was a massive win for Tennessee. And to get it done, ironically, with their defense, which has often been very maligned. Now, they were fortunate that Josh Allen kind of slipped as he was trying to convert the 4th and 1 right at the end. I think it tells you a lot about Sean McDermott, that he wants to try and win that game rather than play for overtime. And to be honest with you, I absolutely love that. The Bills will be just fine. The Bills are going to walk their way. They could sleepwalk their way to the AFC East. They could play Diggs at quarterback and Josh Allen a wide receiver, and they'd win the AFC East. But I think the Titans will be pushed a little bit by the Colts in the AFC South, but I don't think there's any real stress on Tennessee's plate in terms of winning the division. They will run literally behind Derrick Henry and take that title.
Derrick Henry so far has 783 rushing yards this season. If you average that out per game, it's 130.5 yards a game. When if you put that in 17 games, he will rush for 2,218 yards this season, which is just unbelievable. The guy's insane. I was talking to a friend about him earlier, and not only is it crazy how much of a unit he is, and how much of like a walking fridge he is, but he's also just got such an acceleration about him. Like, there's that play where he rushed through and he rushed the 75-yarder. He was outrunning a cornerback. They just couldn't keep up with him. Like, his turn of pace is insane. And whenever Henry plays well, generally the Titans play well. But like you say, Callum, like sometimes Tannehill has games, and sometimes it's just you sort of look at him and go, is the ghost of Tannehill's Miami past coming back to haunt him? Like, you just can't quite seem to figure it out. I agree that I think they probably will win that division because the Colts have started so poorly. But you know, do they go much further than maybe a wild card or a divisional game? I don't know. I don't think so. I would like to just quickly mention though Julio's catch from the deflection off the helmet, which was unbelievable. If you haven't seen it, just watch that catch where he dives and manages to keep 2 feet on the ground and catches the ball. It's insane. So, definitely worth it for that. But I agree that Buffalo, this was the shock of the week, I think, for most people. I was high on Buffalo going maybe like 15-2, 14-3. And this was a win that I thought was in the bag and evidently not. But I think it's good to not just coast your way to 15 wins, because these types of losses keep you to the ground, and this will wake them up a bit and go, okay, well, maybe we can't beat every team 43-0 every single week. You know, maybe we do need to play a bit more smart football. And, you know, the fact that he put up 353 yards, and 3 touchdowns and still didn't win the game tells you that maybe it wasn't Josh Allen's fault, and perhaps it was the defense that unfortunately came up a bit short this week for Buffalo.
Yeah, both teams moved to 4-2. I agree with Callum. I think both teams are going to comfortably walk to their respective divisional titles, though. So that may well be a game we see again in January. And obviously, keeping the king quiet will be the challenge for Buffalo if it does roll around again in the postseason. Talking of players and getting up to speed, let's speed things up a bit, fellas, and go through the rest of the slate from week number 6. Get caught up with all of the results and a bit of snap reaction to each of them. Steve, you've got to cast your mind back a fair bit, mate, to last Thursday night, but your boys kicked it off, Philly and Tampa.
Yeah, Philly brought it back a little bit and made it closer than it actually was. Tampa's offense stuttered a little bit in the second half, but this could have been 40-plus points for Tampa. The Phillies' offense was absolutely nowhere to be seen. So many 3-and-outs in the first half, they just couldn't get anything going. Jalen Hurts ended up having 2 rushing touchdowns himself. The usage of Miles Sanders continues to be a bit of an enigma in Philadelphia. But, still encouraging to see Quez Watkins and Devonta Smith emerge as useful offensive targets. Meanwhile, in Tampa Bay, the story of Tampa Bay seems to be that they keep losing key players to injury, but they keep knocking down teams and picking up results. Tom Brady just rolls on, and their rushing game was unstoppable. The Eagles could not stop the rush. So in the end, the scoreline flattered the Eagles. It probably should have been a bit more convincing for Tampa Bay, but they move on to 5-1 and look pretty unbeatable at the moment.
They do indeed. Callum, let's move on to yourself. Probably the tightest game of the early window on Sunday. Panthers, Vikings went to overtime, went the way of Minnesota.
And this is my nomination for most confusing game and teams in the league. I can't get a read on either of these two teams. I can't figure out if they're good or if they're bad. I'm not a Kirk Cousins guy generally, but the Vikings have so much talent around him that I think it can kind of just about work. Conversely, the Panthers started out 3-0, largely on the back of their defense and Sam Darnold being a rushing quarterback out of nowhere. And this game was weird. It was back and forth, and then the Panthers had their big comeback and got the 2-point conversion and finally remembered that Robbie Anderson was on their team and threw him a touchdown and got it to overtime. And then you kind of think that all the momentum is with Carolina, and then the NFL's overtime rules bite you in the bum, and KJ Osborne walks it off for the Vikings. So I'm not convinced that the Vikings are going to push Green Bay in the NFC North. I think that there's holes in that defense, and I just really don't trust Kirk Cousins when the chips are down. It really matters. And for Carolina, I think they will be squabbling with the Saints for second place in the NFC South. Because I think Atlanta are really bad, and the Buccaneers, as much as I don't want them to be, are just too good for anybody in that division.
Yeah, completely agree, mate. Completely agree. Let's move on to a team that I can certainly figure out, and I hate to say it, arguably the best team in the NFL at the minute. The Baltimore Ravens moved to 5-1. What happened to the Chargers? What on earth happened to the Chargers? Austin Eckler, 6 carries, 7 yards. Joshua Kelly, 4 carries, 7 yards. Mike Williams, the big play guy, 2 receptions for 27 yards. God knows what happened to the Chargers offense, and fair play to Baltimore. I'll talk a little bit about injuries that other teams have had. No team has had as much probably as Baltimore, but no one's talking about it because they're 5-1. They've lost their entire running back room. Look at this for some rushing performance this weekend. Lamar Jackson, 51 yards. Devonta Freeman, 53 yards. Latavius Murray, 44 yards. It doesn't matter who's carrying the ball. They are getting some production out of that ground game. Absolutely dominated time of possession. Dominated it to the tune of 38 minutes to 21. Just an absolute cakewalk for the Ravens. They move impressively to 5-1. And ominously, like I say, doing so with a huge number of people on the injury list as well. So that team will only get stronger as it gets healthier. Steve, let's move to you. Another team that looked good this weekend. The Rams back to business, absolutely trouncing the Giants.
The Rams continue to march on after their loss to Arizona, and I think that they are as good as any team in the NFL right now. Matt Stafford, his no-look pass was a thing of beauty, and had another really impressive game, 251 yards, 4 touchdowns, had a passer rating of 128.7, which is far more than could be said of his opposite number, Daniel Jones, who went 29 for 51, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 4 sacks, had a QBR rating on ESPN of 6.4. which is not great at all. This New York team have unfortunately been succumbed to a lot of injuries. Saquon Barkley didn't play in this game. Kadarius Toney, who had a bit of a breakout game last week, was forced off after only three receptions for 36 yards. Looked really promising at the start of the game, and had to go off through injury and was ruled out pretty early on. But even with that considered, this New York team looks a shambles right now. A lot of people in New York starting to call for heads of maybe Gettleman, maybe Judge, who knows. But yeah, for what seemed to be a promising off season and a lot of hyperbole around New York, it seemed to be a very insular hyperbole because they are still just as dreadful as they were last year and years before. But yeah, the Rams moved to 5-1. I don't see where their next loss comes from. Likewise, the Giants moved to 1-5. I don't see where their next win comes from.
Fair dues, man. A fairly good way to wrap that one up. Callum, let's move across to you. It took a few weeks, but this is the Houston Texans we all thought we were going to see absolutely walloped by the Colts, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I mean, the Texans are really, really, really bad. And I say that as somebody who has a number of friends who are diehard Houston Texans fans. And it's difficult to have to tell them that their team is awful. I feel extremely sorry for Brandon Cooks, who deserves better. He is still somehow making himself relevant by catching 8+ passes every single week. It's funny that the Texans have almost tried the same idea as the Ravens in terms of filling a running back room with cast-offs from other teams. But whereas the Ravens have filled it with the best running backs from 2016, the Texans have filled it with mediocre running backs from 2019 in Philip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, David Johnson, and Rex Burkhead, which is just a strange way to try and build a running back room. They've got absolutely no hope, and it's similar to what Steve just said about the Giants. I mean, the only reason that the Texans might win another game is that they have to play the Jaguars again. And that's the only reason they're not going 0-17 is that they got the Jaguars before Urban had really put his stamp on that organization. So yeah, I was happy for the Colts to get another win, but it was about of an easy as a pick that the Colts were going to get that win as anything else. I need to mention Jonathan Taylor, who's obviously having a superb time right now. And it was really good to see T.Y. Hilton back on the field, though I do think he left the game with an injury late on, so hopefully that's not too serious. But I will always love T.Y. for his celebrations and partnership with Andrew Luck a few years ago. So, good for the Colts. The Texans are terrible. I think it's really kind of starting to heat up in terms of potential Deshaun Watson trade time. Obviously, I think it's very clear how I'm sure most, if not all, logical people feel about the Deshaun Watson situation right now. It's a very difficult thing to try and discuss. And I am petrified that my team is going to make a trade offer for him. And I will have to try and figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The trade deadline 2 weeks, I think it is. So yeah, we'll keep you posted on anything that happens there. Kansas City back to business. We said it was probably the ideal game for them. The Washington football team, yeah, again giving up more than 30 points on defense, as again we predicted last week that they would do. Quite possibly, seemingly the most overhyped unit heading into this season. They moved to 2-4, Chiefs to 3-3. There's probably been more talk after the game about Patrick Mahomes' family than there has been about the game itself, which probably shows you how uncompetitive it was. The halftime scoreline was fairly tight, but the Chiefs scored 21 unanswered in the second half to comfortably run out winners in this one. Couple of nice throws from Mahomes that you've probably seen from multiple different angles across his body and all the rest of it. Of course, people will have you believe he's the only quarterback ever to walk the earth that is capable of making those throws. Unfortunately, we will have to live with that for the next 10 years as he's the face of the NFL. But certainly back to business for the Chiefs and Washington. Lots and lots of questions to answer. Lots and lots of questions to answer. They look an absolute shell of the team that closed out the previous season relatively strongly. And similarly to what you just said about the Giants there, it's difficult to actually look and see where wins are coming from for this team. 2-4, if the alarm bells aren't already ringing, they certainly should be very, very soon indeed. Next one on the slate, Steve, Green Bay and Chicago.
I still own you I still own you. There is nothing better than Chris Long summed it up, that Aaron Rodgers is like the WWE heel of the Chicago Bears. He absolutely loves it, and I think he is at all time. I think 11-3 against the Bears in Soldier Field, which is just fantastic. And that celebration was just fantastic because he's not taunting the players. He's not going to get a penalty for taunting other opponents. He's taunting an entire stadium of fans. Oh, absolutely love it. Great performance from Rodgers. Actually ran in for that touchdown, which you don't see too often. And this Green Bay team just rolls on, just a confident machine that shows that week one loss was just a blip of week one. Josh often says that week one is a mulligan and everyone gets the week one result because nothing really matters. And it just showing this Green Bay team since week one have been perfect. And just keep rolling on, and it does make you wonder what's going to happen in the off season, and all of that talk with Aaron Rodgers before the season of him potentially moving on, and then it's settling all of the issues and then coming back and playing. It's all been swept on the carpet. Now everyone's forgotten that. Now that the Green Bay are rolling, so yeah, I think Green Bay will stroll to this divisional title. I don't think anyone's going to challenge them again. Much like Callum was saying about the Vikings, the Bears flattering to deceive. They're 3-3 again. Matt Nagy's time is probably going to be up at the end of this year, but we've been saying that for about 4 seasons, so who knows? Their defense seems to bail them out of games occasionally when they're up against a team that's not quite good enough. But unfortunately, when they play a good team, they don't have enough on offense to make it count. So I think this Chicago team will be around the 500 mark. I think they might finish above Minnesota, but who knows? Flip a coin for those games. But yeah, Green Bay rolls on.
Callum, let's come back to you. Detroit, Cincinnati. Detroit have been punchy in most games recently. Typical when people give them a bit of a squeak and a bit of a sniff of an opportunity, they get blown out big style. Big win for the Bengals.
Yeah, I'll tell you one team that isn't finishing above the Vikings, and it's the Detroit Lions. I like Dan Campbell. I think he's got a nice spirit about him. I think he is giving the Lions an identity, and I think something that we all maybe suspected when they made the Stafford trade is that Jared Goff probably doesn't fit that identity. And I wasn't surprised to see Campbell calling out Goff in the aftermath of this game. I think that the Lions are genuine contenders for an 0-17 right now. I would hope that doesn't happen, but it's hard to see them picking up an in-division win unless Matt Nagy really tries hard to throw the second game against them away. The Lions, there's not a lot of hope for them there. As far as Cincinnati go, one of the surprise packages of the season so far, I did have a preseason take that I thought the Steelers could maybe be the worst team in the AFC North. And that might well come to fruition here if the Bengals can do their job in division. It's not surprising, and it's great to see the Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, partnership rekindled from the LSU days. But Joe Mixon's doing the business as well. Former Sooner running back, he's really coming into his own. The Bengals' big question mark has always been Zach Taylor as a head coach, but you could argue that this is kind of the first time that he's had potentially a competent team all round, and their defense isn't playing too bad either. The Lions were shut out until relatively late in the fourth quarter, when Dan Campbell decided to kick a field goal down 28 points or whatever, which is always quite embarrassing. But just to get on the board, and I think they got a swift touchdown late on to make it slightly less embarrassing. But no, I like the Bengals. They're a team I enjoy watching, and they pushed the Packers all the way, which is more than some teams are going to be able to say this year. So I think the Bengals are a surprise package. I think they probably fall short of the playoffs, but I think they flirt around the winning season mark.
Yeah, no doubt about that. They're certainly playing well. Certainly playing better than another team in the AFC North, which brings me on to my weekly Cleveland Browns little section of the podcast. So, yeah, Browns, Cardinals, very one-sided. Really was worried when the injury report came out in terms of the Browns' 2 tackles, particularly with the banged-up quarterback, and it is showing big style. mentioned the Ravens earlier, so I'm not looking for any sympathy, and I won't get any sympathy, so I'm certainly not searching for it. The injury report is a laundry list at the minute. Kareem Hunt now onto IR, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah onto IR, Jarvis Landry still on IR. No sign of the tackles playing, and Baker Mayfield essentially playing with one arm. It's not great. I was full of optimism pre-season. It almost feels like last season's San Francisco 49ers, where they were expected to potentially go back to the Super Bowl after a great run the year previously. Big things were expected of the Browns after an 11-5 season, and actually looking for the first time to have a competent coaching staff, etc., etc. But it really has not gone well. Let's talk Cardinals briefly, and then Callum, I'm sure you're going to quiz me on something Cleveland. But in terms of the Cardinals, look, they looked every bit a 6-0 side. Very, very impressive performance. DeAndre Hopkins, probably still arguably the best receiver in the league. And when your complementary options are AJ Green, who looks revitalised in a new uniform, Rondale Moore, a really exciting rookie, and if Christian Kirk's your fourth option, I mean, boy, oh boy, that's a fairly decent unit. James Conner ran hard as well. He was impressive enough. And defensively, look, JJ Watt was probably always going to have his best game as a Cardinal against those fifth choice backup tackles, but he did the job. Did the job well, got Baker down on the ground a couple of times, forced a couple of fumbles, and yeah, wasn't a pretty day. Not the thing I wanted after a 4-hour journey home from London to come back to. And yeah, Thursday night football, not a great week for a short turnaround. But go on, Callum, I'm sure you're dying to ask me something, man.
Well, I'm you're going to get sympathy from me. I'm a fan of the Browns. I enjoy the Browns. I'm a big Baker guy. I think the question for me is really looking out for those listeners and viewers of ours who maybe are into their fantasy football and maybe are desperate for a running back. And obviously with Nick Chubb now ruled out for Thursday and Kareem Hunt on IR, are we targeting Dearness Johnson, or does Demetric Felton's kind of passing game expertise mean he's the guy that we should be going for on the waiver wire?
I think in all likelihood, in terms of this week, it probably for me would be Demetric Felton. I think in terms of who's likely to get the bulk of the carries, possibly you would go Dearness Johnson, but based on the game plan for this week, the first drive of the Browns saw no rushing attempts. I'm slightly concerned that is the game plan, but I imagine it's going to be similar. I don't think either of the Browns' two tackles are going to go again on Thursday night. Neither have practiced again today, although they haven't been ruled out. And I think that Demetric Felton will probably get more work, possibly based on game script, possibly based on the fact that, dare I say that the Browns may be playing from behind again in this one. It's really difficult. I mean, I'm normally the most optimistic Browns fan going. Steve will tell you that, but even I am struggling for optimism this week when it comes to the Browns. So yeah, Felton I would probably take at a pinch this week. Although I think Nick Chubb will be back after this one, because obviously the Browns effectively with a mini bye. Boy, do they need 10 days off to at least try and get healthy. Let's move it on, fellas. Two more to finish off, and then we'll quickly touch on the rest of the Week 7 slate as well. So, Steve, talk to us about Denver, who we've just mentioned are the Browns' opponents this week. They had a third defeat in a row, this time against Las Vegas.
Just quickly, I would just say I cannot believe that Baker Mayfield didn't dislocate his shoulder. That when he went down with that sack from JJ Watt, and his left arm was on the ground and his back just sort of twisted around. It looked horrible on the TV, and I can't believe he isn't more seriously injured than he is. So yeah, very lucky for him. Yes, but Denver, Josh will be rubbing his hands together with his lack of trust in Denver when they were 3-0 and refusing to put them in the top half of the power rankings, because boy was he right. They are now 3-3. I think they are another team that has suffered with the injury curse. You look at their receiving core and they've lost so many options around the team in general, but Teddy Bridgewater had such a sort of Jekyll and Hyde game. 35-49, 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions and 5 sacks, losing 25 yards. So this is Bridgewater. This is what you get with Bridgewater. He's not going to be a top 10 guy, but he's also not the worst in the league, and that is the 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions just shows you how sometimes he can be the best of both worlds, unfortunately for Denver. And they probably would have been, quite looking forward to going playing Las Vegas after the turmoil in Las Vegas last week that we touched on. But we said at the time, maybe the Raiders can use that as fuel to unite and play together and have a team performance. And boy, did they. They looked excellent, and they put everything behind them. All of the issues off the field last week, they just put it all behind them and played a really good game. And if it wasn't for a late touchdown for Denver, this game would have been much further out of Denver's reach than it looked. Derek Carr played well, 341 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a 134.4 passer rating. Henry Ruggs had a bit of a breakout game with a long reception of 48 yards. So this Vegas team showing that they're not done and dusted yet. They go to 4-2 and make things very, very interesting in that division. With Kansas City now back to 3-3, with the Chargers losing as well that we've touched on. They got shut out. So there's 2 teams at 4-2 and there's 2 teams at 3-3. What a fascinating division. So, it'd be really interesting to see how that plays out for the rest of the season. I think the Raiders will start to fall away a little. I think they will finish with a positive record, but maybe sort of the sort of 10-7, 9-8 mark around that sort of level. But I think this Denver team is in trouble if these injuries keep stacking up. They need to get some players back and quick.
Yeah. Now that feeling well, mate. Know it well. Callum, round us off. Pittsburgh, Seattle closed the week and Sunday Night Football. First action for Geno Smith in a few years, but Pittsburgh ultimately get the job done in overtime. Yeah,
when NBC was scheduling their Sunday Night Football slate, I don't think they had Geno Smith against Broken Ben in mind. But that's where they ended up. I feel bad for Seattle. They're a team that I like. They're a fan base that I like. I feel bad for Geno. He seems like a perfectly nice guy. Twice in a week now, based on when he was interjected into the game last week against the Rams. And then this one against the Steelers. He's had the ball with a chance to drive down and potentially win the game and turned it over. TJ Watt, that's what he does. You can't really be annoyed at Geno for losing that fumble. It's great defensive play. But the Seahawks are in a bit of a pickle. It's not a coincidence they've been linked with Cam Newton this week. I feel like if they were going to do that, they would have done it already. If they didn't believe in Geno, I think they would have made that move already. Based on the fact that Geno has been there for a number of years now behind Russ, prepping for this. And, away at Pittsburgh is not an easy fixture for him to kind of start with. Though sadly with the Seahawks schedule, it doesn't get that much easier generally. When you're in the NFC West, it never will. The game itself, Najee Harris continues to show why he's going to be a superstar in this league for decades to come. I'm a big Chase Claypool guy. Nice to see him getting more involved in the Steelers offense as well. You do just wonder if the Steelers had a slightly younger quarterback, maybe they would be able to go somewhere this season. And I know Sean won't be sad to hear that the end of the Big Ben dynasty has come. But it really does feel like they're almost rolling him out there on a walker to sit in the pocket and throw passes down the field, often inaccurately right now. I wonder what the rushing line for Ben's yards for the season is. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 2 or 3 for the year, because he's not going anywhere fast. It looks like he's running in concrete shoes. I think the Steelers will, because of the quality of the coach that Mike Tomlin is, not embarrass themselves this year. And their defense has some nice pieces. But I think they will be right around the, at best, 8-9, 9-8 record season. I think, Tomlin's never had the losing season, I believe, and I'm sure that's a streak he wants to continue. But if there's going to be a year where that happens, it's this year. As for Seattle, I took their win total over in a number of season-long bets, which I would really like to win. So I'm going to hope that Seattle can get it together. But the sooner that Russ gets out of that fake huddle he was running and back into the real one, the better for the Seahawks, because they really do need him. I wanted to touch on DK Metcalf and Shannon Sharp going at it on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this. But Shannon Sharp was attacking DK Metcalf, which I actually didn't disagree with the point that Shannon Sharp was making. I think DK should have probably gone out of bounds, but I also do appreciate someone trying to make a play for their team. I thought it was a strange kind of beef to get into between the two of them because they're both fairly, very obviously Sharp is a very, very talented NFL Hall of Famer, right? And I think DK Metcalf has proven that he's an elite receiver in this league as well. So a bit of a strange one that's what happened, but I like that DK is willing to stand up for himself in a public domain. I want more of that from my superstar players in the league. I don't want people hiding behind a mask of anonymity and then all of a sudden becoming a social media genius 15 years into your career like Tom Brady. So I'd rather DK Metcalf was out there saying things with his chest.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see if that starts a bit of a trend now. I think a few more players are snapping back at some of these so-called experts, aren't they? So we'll wait and see how that transpires throughout the course of the season. That was week 6. We'll quickly touch week 7. We're not going to release a separate podcast this week, like I say, with Josh on holiday and other commitments that we have all got this week. And to be honest, it just one of those things. It hasn't necessarily worked out as a great slate of games, unfortunately. Mentioned it already. Broncos opens up Thursday night football. Really a battle of the two reserve sides. Even as a Browns fan, I'm debating getting up at 20 past 1 on Friday morning to watch this one. Can't exactly get overly excited about it. So that opens up the week. We've then, fellas, in the early window, got Packers and Washington, Giants, Panthers, Patriots, Jets, Titans, Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, and Dolphins, Falcons. Steve, any of those in the early window tickle your fancy?
Yeah, I think the Titans Chiefs will be an interesting one, with Titans coming off the back of a win against the seemingly unbeatable Bills, and a Chiefs team that is desperately trying to get back above a 500 record. Could the Chiefs slip up again? They cannot seem to put together back-to-back wins this season, and if they lose to the Titans, you've got to start asking questions about where this season is going to finish for Kansas City. Meanwhile, the Titans look, they're going to keep trying to run the ball through Derrick Henry, and you'd think that Ryan Tannehill will potentially have himself a pretty decent game with this one, with that Chiefs passing defense the way that it currently is. So this is one's at Arrowhead. It wouldn't surprise me if the Titans do manage to get there and win. But I don't know if I want to call that just yet.
Callum, same question to you, mate, in that early window. I think probably Bengals, Ravens, possibly the one, certainly from a record standpoint, that probably stands out.
Yeah, I think that's probably I think that's probably the second most exciting behind Steve's pick, obviously, of Chiefs and Titans. I think it'll be really interesting to see how Joe Burrow stands up against that Ravens defense. I remember Baker Mayfield really struggling with the Bengals defense in his early years with the Browns, and I think Burrow needs to prove that he can win AFC North games if the Bengals are really going to be a success. So that's one worth keeping an eye on. I will be deliberately not keeping an eye on the Dolphins against the Falcons. I think that it will be interesting to see just how many combined interceptions Zach Wilson throws against the Patriots and Daniel Jones throws against the Panthers, because both of those two defenses will be circling and ferocious. And then, in the late window, I want to see how many the Cardinals beat the Texans by, because it could be 30, 40, 50 or more.
Yeah, just to round out that light window. So other ones in the light window: Raiders and Eagles, Rams, Lions, Buccaneers, Bears. Yeah, Callum's mentioned there, Cardinals, Texans, and then rounding out the week, your primetime games. Again, I don't think the schedule makers will be jumping for joy. The 49ers and the Indianapolis Colts is Sunday night football, and the Seattle Seahawks, New Orleans Saints, Monday night. Steve, give you a chance to come back in as well. Any other games that you'll be keeping a particular eye on?
I mean, you've got two games in the late window that could potentially see two shutouts. Like the Rams are playing the Lions, and like you mentioned, Colin, the Cardinals are playing the Texans. Like there is a legitimate chance there that both of those games could be shutouts. They probably won't both be, but I wouldn't be surprised if both of those teams put up 40 plus points each. The Seahawks Saints is one of those games that, had you have looked at that at the start of the season, you think, oh yeah, that's going to be a real tasty game. But now you look at that and think, well, the Seahawks are down Russell Wilson, and they've never ever been down Russell Wilson, as we discussed last week. He's never missed a game. And the Saints are a bit of a sort of, are they good, are they not? Who knows? But what is interesting is that this is week 7, which means that players can come back off PUP this week. And guess who's on PUP in New Orleans?
Mm-hmm.
Their star wide receiver. So it'd be interesting to see if Michael Thomas can come back and have an instant impact with Jameis Winston. We were talking about the Seahawks just previously. Their schedule does not get easy. They've got a couple of games against this Saints game, which is probably not an easy game, and then the Jaguars, and then they've got Packers, Cardinals, the football team, the Niners, Texans maybe, Rams, Bears, Lions, Cardinals. That is not an easy run of games. So, if Wilson misses some serious time, you've got to wonder where they pick up any more than sort of 3 or 4 wins from that lot. And dare I say it, a sort of 6-11 team for season for Seattle is absolutely not what any of us predicted at the start of this year.
I need 10 wins, Steve. I need 10. Come on.
Well, I think Wilson will be back sooner than we expect. He's on IR, so he's got another 2 weeks minimum out, but I think he will be back sooner than we anticipate.
Geno Smith can beat the Jaguars. I think if the Seahawks are going to do anything this season, they have to win on Sunday. I think they have to beat New Orleans. And they could. I do think they could. But Sean Payton is a good enough coach to coach his way around Geno Smith as well. Though I will say, Steve, I do think that your Eagles have a good chance of getting a win on Sunday against the Raiders, who, again, they got the new coach bounce. But similarly to the Broncos, when the Raiders were 3-0, I was not a believer in them either, and I'm still not. So I like Jalen Hurts to get a win for you on Sunday there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a bit of a tight one. I think it depends which Raiders show up. If it's the early season Raiders that show up, I think there'll be an absolute beatdown for Philadelphia. But Philadelphia have shown in spurts that they can play well this season. They just need to put it all together into one game. So it would be a real statement win to go out to Las Vegas and win that game. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of Philly fans that are making the trip. They'll be looking forward to that, having a weekend in Las Vegas.
Absolutely. Everybody's favourite away day now, mate. The Raiders. Everyone's favourite away day. Right, boys, that wraps it up. It's been an absolute blast as always. Like I say, no sort of separate preview pod from us this week. Like I say, because of other commitments and Josh on holiday. So, like I say, I hope you enjoy Romania, my friend. In the meantime, check out everything on the website, full10yards.com, including the Game Balls article from the brilliant Sean Tyler, up again for week 6. Haven't really mentioned it much on tonight's pod because we were trying to cram everything in. So go and check out the article, see if you agree or disagree with the players and the coaches and the plays that Sean has highlighted from week 6's action. There'll also be plenty of other stuff as we get towards another weekend of action in terms of game previews and all of that kind of good stuff, as well as all of your regular college stuff from the boys over there. And make sure you check out Callum and all the lads on all of the socials on the fantasy side of things as well. Looking forward to seeing who on earth gets picked as Dave's fantasy captain for the Thursday showdown, Cleveland, Denver. My God, what a bevy of talent that man has to pick from. So I will certainly keep my eyes peeled to that one. Callum, it's been a blast, mate. Pleasure having you on. Look forward to having your company again at some point again throughout the season.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it. Very happy to join you anytime. It's a great chat. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. And Steve, as always, pleasure, my friend. We'll catch you next week.
It's been a pleasure. Don't know if Josh is back next week yet, do we? So we might yet be flying another guest. It might be another Geno Smith appearance for Callum.
It could well be. It could well be. But that's the good thing, all things full 10 yards. Plenty of us to have you covered. Plenty of us with plenty of passion and knowledge of the game. And hope you enjoy listening along with us. We'll be back next week. Until then, enjoy week 7. This has been the Full 10 Yards NFL Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Don't forget to find us on all our social channels, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok and YouTube. Head over to our website, full10yards.com, where you can find out more information about why we are #4the game.